Hey everybody. So right behind me, as you can see there's a little building. It's pretty nondescript, and there's not much in front of it. What we are looking at is the entrance to the prison pen here at Point Lookout State Park. Sorry, here in my home state of Maryland. Yeah. Um, Take a little walk. I really didn't want to make this video, so there are a million things to say and less than 15 minutes to say them, and I don't really want to take up a third of that time. But I made a video the last time I was here. I didn't know anything about this place. I felt really embarrassed once I learned about it, but I can still avoid a little embarrassment because most Marylanders don't know about this place, and most Americans don't know about this place. And today I could have taken this time. I've had Civil War on the mind lately. Oop, there's a tiger mosquito. And there's lots of them. And, I was thinking about going into Antietam the other day. I was even thinking about going up to Gettysburg. And it's not the distance traveled that concerns me. They're all far drives. This, for me, is a bit over a 2-hour drive. Turn around real quick here. So if you see up there, that is it's a replica of the wall. Some sources say the walls were 15 feet. Some say they were about closer to 20. This is all a replica back here, of course. But Point Lookout, I think, deserves special attention. Very special attention. Like every war, like during every war and after every war, history is always written by the winners. And before I say anything else, I have to say a couple things. First of all, hopefully we understand at this point that all wars are bankers' wars, first and foremost. There are always other things, attached on the side, kind of like a sidecar bill in Congress, right? All wars are bankers' wars, believe it or not. Any seasoned researcher of war will tell you that, at least in the modern era, in the last couple hundred years. And the other thing I want to say, since we're going to address the Civil War, is that all major wars, all global wars, are usually almost always extensions of the previous one. I'm going to show you a little, what do we got here? It's going to be too hard for you to read. There's a little signage, and it's in reverse. God, I don't like being back here. This is where the prison pens were. They sprawled a bit more ground, of course, than you see around here. This is a very contentious part of the Civil War. And there are many contentious parts of the Civil War, of course. But Maryland, my home state, of course, is a border state, and that really plays into this story. So basically, Point Lookout was established almost immediately after Gettysburg. And the primary reason, of course, was obvious. There were tons and tons of casualties. So many more casualties, that they never expected during this war. And in Gettysburg, it came full-fledged, and, everybody was shocked. And they had to do something with, of course, the bodies. And, of course, they had to do something with the prisoners and the wounded. So that's why this place was established. My point in bringing this place up is because when you get into Civil War history, if this topic is ever breached, and I mean breached, but if the topic of prisoners of war and the American Civil War ever comes up, all you ever hear about is Andersonville. Andersonville, Andersonville, Andersonville. What about Andersonville? I'm not really here to draw comparisons. There were more casualties at Andersonville, but there are tons of differences between these two prisons that just doesn't warrant. It really doesn't warrant comparisons. Many died in both jails, as they did in New York and Elmira. So one of the biggest lessons about this little spiel here is that what you've heard about Andersonville All the atrocious things that you've heard about Andersonville basically happened at every other Civil War prison in those few years. Now, to a lesser degree and to a greater degree in this prison or that prison, right? Some prisons were bigger, some prisons were smaller. Some prisons had good commanders, some prisons had bad commanders. It's just like any other story, right? But that's the logic here that you need to follow, because it's I know it's the official story that, you know, the South were the bad guys and everything that they did was bad and everything that the Union did was good. But I'm not here to do, you know, Civil War kiddie style 101. That's not what this is about here. This is about addressing reality. I'm not sure where I'm allowed to walk and where I'm not. But both were awful, dreadful places where thousands and thousands of men died. Don't forget, when I say men, that's you know, a loose term. Don't forget that the average age of the average soldier in the Civil War was even younger than you know, the average age of, you know, a tender 18 or so in the Vietnam War. We're talking about boys. We are not talking about men. We are talking about boys. We're talking about mothers' sons. We're talking about siblings, older brothers. Okay, some of these soldiers were 14, 15, 16 years old in both armies, but more so in the Confederacy, of course, because they were harder up for bodies. So that is one point. A lot of the you know, in every Civil War movie, you know, in popular culture that you've ever seen, all the depictions of the soldiers are of always old white guys with big long beards. That was not the case. Again, we're here to address reality and not kiddie Civil War, my first Sony 101. You know, that's not what this is. So many of the prisoners in this camp here who endured extreme exposure to the elements, because unlike other camps, unlike Andersonville, tents were all they had at this camp of 20,000. There were no permanent structures for the prisoners. Let me repeat that. There were no permanent structures for the prisoners, for boys caught up in this ungodly mess. They didn't give them shelters. They didn't, you know, anything close to that. They had tents, and moreover, let me walk over to these mock tents. Moreover, this wasn't one person to a tent. This wasn't two people to a tent, or three. Usually, inside this tent, which is about 5 by, 8 feet or so, it would be crammed full of guys. Crammed full of guys. This tent here would have like 5 or 6 guys in it. This tent over here could have 7 or 8 guys in it. That tent over there could have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 guys in it. And that's all they had. A little bit about Maryland's geography. It's really, to be honest, climate, not too bad. But it can certainly hit extremes, and it can certainly hit extremes somewhere like Point Lookout, where it is utterly exposed. We are on a cape or a point, if people know what that is. It is a skinny fragment of a peninsula that juts all the way out there and that is exposed from all sides. It's more or less like being on an island. You might as well be on Smith Island here as I'm batting mosquitoes away, because it is absolutely low-lying, low-country wetlands, a pretty nasty environment, except in certain conditions, say, you know, over at the beach, right? But the summers can actually be dreadful in a place like, you know, anywhere in the lower bay of Maryland. Trust me. Anywhere like Cambridge, anywhere like down here, St. Mary's County, the summers can be very, very, very bad if you don't know how to deal with them. And of course, we are talking about people with no clean clothes, with no change of clothes, with and you know, living not in shelters, but in tents, right? And the winters. Again, on a peninsula, it should go without saying, most people should understand, it can be brutal, even in the, you know, these latitudes in the mid-Atlantic. Trust me, absolutely. If you were out on Smith Island or down here at Point Lookout, Maryland, in the winter, the winds will rock your house, the cold will bite your butt, and it can get god-awfully frigid, plus the wind. Don't forget the wind. The wind. So, you know, environment conditions, of course, were awful. The place, as you can understand, was squalid. To address one semi-contentious point real quick, and I'm going to try to wrap this up. One semi-contentious point about how prisoners were treated between North and South was, there is the argument that the South had far fewer resources at their disposal. That is true. Now, some people, of course, could say, well, that's just something that they fall back on, and that's an easy way out. Yes, but Secretary of War Ed Stanton, of course, as we know, was more or less like a Sherman in the White House. He was pretty brutal. And here at Point Lookout, I can't talk about other camps, but here at Point Lookout, he certainly cut rations at least twice. So there were periods when these men didn't eat, and when they did eat, the standard rations of a prisoner here at Point Lookout was 1 piece of cornbread a day. That's about it. Sometimes when they got lucky, there would be a quote-unquote soup, a bacon soup with putrid pieces of fat in it, and maggots. And that wasn't very often. So sometimes, of course, prisoners had to resort. Sometimes the prisoners, there were stories about them basically eating anything they could get. Rat was the most popular, as you can imagine. And compared to what they were eating in this camp, is from what the accounts that I've read, that when they ate rats, it was a delicacy. It was great eating compared to what they were served by our government, or by the Union's government, however you want to look at that. Many ate dogs. That is definitely on the record. And there were reports of prisoners that ate seagulls. I'm not sure how they caught them, but there are reports that they ate seagulls as well. So I mean, but they were certainly eating anything that they could get their hands on out here, because that's how dire the situation is. And then there's disease, of course. We won't have to go through the whole mess about how in wartime there is always disease, there is always cholera, there is always everything that was going around at the time. Plus, they had smallpox. So of course, way back there was a smallpox unit. This was not a nice place by any stretch of means. Don't ever kid yourself that really in any war, and the Civil War being no exception, that the good guys were the good guys, and I'm just going to leave it at that. B, that they did things by the book, and that they did things by the letter of the law, when they absolutely did not. Because in the short time the prisoners were here at Point Lookout, it's Camp Hoffman, by definition. It's known today as Point Lookout Park. No less than 3,400 men died here in a very, very short period of time, in a couple years. We're not talking, in modern prisons, that there are, regular deaths, but they are quite low when you compare it to something like this. People were dying every day. Few people, 10 people, 20 people sometimes, 3 people, could be your friend, could be anybody, could be a soldier. People were dying here on a very, very routine basis. It was an awful, awful place to be. It was an awful way to be treated, even during wartime, even as the bad guy. Some people still like to think that there are rules of war, that there's international law, so to speak, either by definition or loosely speaking. Most powers and governments over the ages have usually had some loose rules for war. What's permissible? War is ugly. War is going to be bad, but we're still going to set some basic ground rules. Often in regards to prisoners, often in regards to a lot of things. When it came to the prisoners, by the way, so when the war started out, I'm sure a lot of people know, there was a prisoner exchange, and it was loosely based on past wars like the Spanish-American War, but it was dropped because the Union didn't want to take part. At first, it was because Lincoln said that he couldn't acknowledge any part of the Confederacy, of course, publicly and officially. I'll leave that aside. You can play around with that one and believe it or not. But eventually, of course, everything was choked, and the purpose was just to completely choke the South. Not just the soldiers, of course, but the people, as we know. It was a brutal affair. Much more could be said. I'm not, by the way, I'm not the foremost Civil War expert or scholar. There are tons of people who can tell you way more about the certain battles. There's certain generals, certain movements of certain armies and stuff like that. That's not what I do. What I do, I don't really do the who, because the who is usually a distraction. I'm not really getting at the how so much either, because the how is pretty clear. Starvation and disease, pretty much, and shooting prisoners every so often. Might I add that the guards were almost completely colored, or I'm sorry. Okay, look, I know it's 2023. I read a lot of books. The books that I read always mention that the Union Guards were mostly colored, mostly black Americans, recently freed, and of course that's part of their deal, and that's part of the mess of why a place like this is so nasty, because so you had black slaves who were recently freed, right? Well, part of your deal is you get to go fight for us and put your neck out on the line and possibly catch a bullet and never come home. Of course, that's still not the worst proposition to a former slave. That these things should go without saying. But it should also go without saying that in wartime, you're going to have certain people do certain tasks, and certain other people will do certain other tasks. That should go without saying. And there were many, many parts, of course, about service in any war that the white soldiers did not want to do. An easy example is take the front lines. You know, like in the movie Glory. I mean, a lot of black soldiers were glorified for stuff like that, and rightly so. However, the glory is not, it's kind of diminished when you understand that they were put to be human shields. And when it came to Point Lookout, that this was a place that no white Union folks wanted to work, period. They wouldn't do it. So that's why black soldiers usually, almost completely, were the guards at this place. And sometimes up on those elevations and shooting at the prisoners. It was an ugly time. Fever was running high. Everybody was pissed off. I understand these things. I understand war pretty well. I didn't cover everything by far, but hopefully these give you a couple things to think about at Point Lookout. These were Marylanders. Some people were civilians. Most of those boys were very young, and the ultimate end point of all this is that we were divided intentionally, just like we're being divided again intentionally right now. We're all Americans. When people are manipulated, when people are lied to, when people are deceived, when one camp is told this and one camp is told that, once you establish that initial, pow, snap, everything else starts rolling downhill. Everything gets ugly, and then everybody forgets what they were really pissed off about and what they really disagreed about and who they really were and what they really believed before these issues were presented to them. That's kind of how I want to leave off here. So, till the next one, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little tour, selfie tour of Point Lookout.